Well, hi, and welcome back to another episode of the Happy Retirement Show. This is Colin Hurst and Victor Gray. Victor, how are you this week?
Wonderful.
We've got a lot of exciting things to talk about. It's certainly been what I would consider an interesting start to the year. And no matter what's happening with politicians or in the markets or in your local town, whatever's going on in your world, we want this show to help you have a retirement that is satisfying, fulfilling, and most of all, happy.
Happy.
So that's the whole point of the show.
There you go.
And this week I want to talk about 5 ways that people have either wishful thinking or conventional wisdom, things that people think about retirement, about money, that might sound good, might sound helpful, might seem like a plan, but really is, we've seen time and time again, a lot of these things are accidents waiting to happen. So before we get into those, if you haven't already, make sure you take a moment right now and subscribe to the Happy Retirement Show. You can like this video as well as hit the bell so you stay notified for when next week's come out. You know, Victor, I think the biggest piece of wishful thinking or conventional wisdom that we hear from folks is, don't worry, when I'm in retirement, I'm certain I'll be in a lower tax bracket in retirement. And sometimes that can be true, but that's not necessarily always the case, is it?
Well, no, because and the one that just jumps out at you, tax rates could go up. And, you know, as we're speaking right now, the Senate is trying to pass the big, beautiful bill, and it may or may not. But, you know, looming is a major tax hike on virtually every taxpayer in America if that bill doesn't pass in some form or fashion to extend the already reduced tax rates. Mm-hmm. But the big point there is you have no control over it. Mm-mm. So, you know, on a year-by-year basis, maybe a couple years in advance, you know, when we sit down and we talk with people, we can work on a tax strategy for their income, a tax strategy for their investments, etc. But you can't work on a tax strategy to control those tax brackets and those tax rates. And so taxes may be higher, they may not be, they may be lower, but who knows what they'll be in 5-10 years from now. You just have no way to control that.
Exactly. You know, just like we have diversification with our money, we don't want to have all of our eggs in one basket. Same thing with retirement planning and taxes. We don't want to have all of our money in tax-deferred accounts like IRAs and 401ks because that really handcuffs us to being inflexible. If we want to make a lump sum withdrawal of, let's say, $40,000, well, you might as well take out $50,000 if you need to pay the taxes on that money.
Absolutely.
So have a tax plan.
Well, if you're going to go on vacation.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, and you're going to go see the kids, the grandkids, whatever the situation is, and it's going to be, you know, a nominal amount of money. You need $3,500.
Yeah.
Well, if your money is all pre-tax, well, now you need $5,000.
Right.
You need $1,500 approximately, or whatever it is, to pay the tax to go on the $3,500 vacation. So your money is more quickly dispersed because you're getting some and the tax man is getting his.
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah, the IRS loves it when you go on vacation.
Especially.
They get paid.
Yeah. Have a plan to minimize your taxes over your lifetime. Maybe your taxes will be lower in retirement, but maybe not. It's certainly a case-by-case decision.
And you do it in advance. You know, you start now to figure out how you're going to pay for that vacation 3, 4, 5 years from now, particularly tax-wise. I mean, the plan needs to be put together with the future in mind so that you're always going to be okay.
Absolutely. You know, another thing that a lot of people think about in retirement, and it's maybe uncomfortable, but it's as it relates to long-term care. Victor, we hear people say all the time, you know, if I need some help, don't worry. My spouse will just take care of me. And we've seen that situation play out, and it never plays out the way people think it will.
No, because it's not like, I heard a story recently where, and this is, of course, is not an actual thing that happened, but, this guy was going to the kitchen, and his wife says, bring me back some ice cream. She says, now, you're getting forgetful. You need to write down, bring back ice cream. So he goes out to the kitchen, and, she says, now, don't forget, I'm getting ice cream. You want to write it down? No, I don't want to write it down. So he brings her back a plate of bacon. She looks at it and says, you forgot my toast. So, it's not as simple as fixing each other a sandwich or, oh, can I get you something to drink? You need to go do this, or can you do this for me, or whatever. It's 168 hours a week of potential care that's needed. It's everything from bathing, toileting, every meal, feeding a person, whatever. And, we'll do whatever it takes for our loved ones. There's no question about that. But what's the toll it takes on you when you're on call 168 hours a week? So, we've seen it to where, a spouse is caretaking for another spouse, and the spouse who is the caretaker is going downhill quicker than the one who's being cared for. There's just so many things you can't control. So many, medical procedures you're just not going to be able to do at home that may need to be done on an ongoing basis. So I just think that you're going to care for each other. The one that I think is a fallacy is that the kids are going to be able to care for you. Well, that's fine until little Billy or Bobby or Susie comes in and says, okay, it's bath time.
Right.
It's just, sometimes it just doesn't work out, and you have to still be okay.
And that's what's so key, Victor, is it's about being okay no matter what happens. And I think a lot of times people have those thoughts about long-term care and needing care. And I think that thinking, oh, my spouse will take care of me or my kids will take care of me is a way to mentally check off the box like, oh, I've addressed the problem, I've got a plan, I don't have to think about it, because it's uncomfortable to think about. But let's be honest. The reality is, if you were in that situation, you wouldn't want your spouse or you wouldn't want your children caring for you. We've never seen a situation where those dynamics, when somebody was in that situation getting care, is what they actually wanted and were happy about occurring.
No, never. And, that's the thing that we work with people on in advance is, you played football, right, Colin?
I did, yeah.
Yes. You look like a football player.
Thanks.
So you had a playbook.
We did, yeah.
Okay. When we sit down, we work with somebody for a financial plan, it's really a playbook. Now, it's a playbook of what could happen. Mm-hmm. You had a playbook. Well, what if they line up in this way? Mm-hmm. What if the ball goes this way? You didn't know what play was going to happen in advance, but you did know how to react to it. And that's what we try to set up for people is no matter what happens, no matter what comes your way, you're still in the best possible situation.
Exactly. It really is like having a playbook for retirement, like we talked about with taxes. Same thing. What if taxes are higher later? What if you need some sort of professional help and care? What if?
Yeah.
You have to plan for things that can go wrong so that you can enjoy the things that will likely go right.
Oh, absolutely.
You know, it's not like we're expecting to have problems. We know we will. We just don't know what they'll be.
Right.
But most of retirement is happy, it's fulfilling, it's joyful, but you have to have a plan for the bad so you can enjoy those good times.
Correct.
Another thing that we hear about retirement planning, specifically as it relates to Social Security, there's a lot of misconceptions about Social Security. A lot of people think, hey, the government is going to provide me with enough Social Security so that I can always have my basic living expenses covered. And that is not at all how they calculate your Social Security benefit, is it?
No. Social Security, of course, in its origin, was never meant to be, let's say, a replacement for your paycheck.
Right.
It was kind of an emergency fund if you lived too long.
Right.
And living too long was past age 65.
Yeah.
So, it wasn't designed. And, when I was a mere child, getting in this business, because I've been in this business, 42 years now.
Yeah.
They talked about a three-legged stool for retirement. Everybody had a three-legged stool. Social Security, your pension, and your own personal monies. Okay? You had three things that you were going to live off of. Well, for most people, the pension's gone.
Yeah.
And Social Security is not as fulfilling as it was years past, because it really hasn't kept up with people's needs and expenses. And then, so all that was left was your own personal money. And most people today have a two-leg stool.
Right.
Right, okay.
They're riding a bicycle.
Yeah, because the pension is not a part of most people's retirements today, except if you were in public service, school teaching, et cetera.
Right.
But the thing about it is to have your money put together and it be enough, and Social Security is a supplement.
Right.
It is not the main driving force for your retirement. Now, if it is, you're not going to be at the standard of probably most people that are listening to a podcast.
Right. That most of the time what we find is we like to stress test a portfolio and a retirement plan without Social Security and saying, hey, can your portfolio still take care of your basic living expenses? And then, hey, if Social Security is there in full capacity like it is, and I always think at least it'll be there in some capacity, but there might be some changes or some adjustments to it. But if we treat it like an extra rather than the bedrock foundation, I think that gives people a lot more confidence that their plan is going to work.
Well, here's a quiz for you, Colin.
Okay.
All right. Here's the first question of the quiz.
Okay.
All right. Do you think politicians will vote to reduce Social Security benefits?
No.
Do you think, based on Social Security structure today, do you think that the benefits should go down?
Yes.
How can they reduce Social Security benefits without lowering them?
Well, very good question. There's a lot of different ways they can reduce Social Security without doing it on paper. The easiest one that comes to mind, though, is making it fully taxable.
There you go.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Keep it the same and increase the tax on it.
Exactly.
Yep.
If people get Social Security tax-free, there are thresholds called provisional income, where if you make less than a certain amount of money, you get Social Security tax-free.
Yeah.
Make between certain amounts of money, get half your Social Security tax-free. Or if you make over a certain amount of money, you only get 15% of your Social Security tax-free.
And if that goes down to 0%
Right.
of it tax-free, that's a big boom for the government.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And they've already done things where those brackets that determine how much Social Security is taxable for you, one of the only things in the IRS tax code called provisional income thresholds, one of the only things that is not adjusted for inflation. When they set those amounts out decades ago, those thresholds have not been adjusted. So as Social Security goes up with cost of living adjustments, people already are getting phased into the next threshold
Right.
without even realizing that it's happening.
And these type things like we're talking about right here, these are things that your broker, your brother-in-law, or whoever helps you with your accounts or advisor, they're not putting this information out
No.
because they don't care. And number two, it doesn't have anything to do with the fee they charge.
Right, exactly.
Right. And these are the things that make a difference, because it's not what your gross is. How much do you get to keep? How much is available for you? And how long is it going to last? Those are the components that are truly important.
Exactly. I've never met a client that is at the end of their retirement plan and we're putting the, double checking the estate plan that's been put in place. And I've never met any single one that has ever asked over the course of working together what their rate of return has been. But I have had all of them ask, is my spouse going to be okay? Am I going to be able to take care of my children? Am I going to be a burden, et cetera, et cetera? That's what really matters in retirement planning at the end of the day.
Absolutely.
Now, rate of return is important. It helps accomplish all those things. But the core question is, hey, am I and the people I love going to be okay and be happy?
And if they're not going to be okay and they're not going to be happy, you're not having a happy retirement.
Exactly.
And that's what this show's all about.
Being happy.
Absolutely.
Another thing that can derail our happy retirement is the thought or the idea of, hey, if I run out of money, don't worry, I'll just go back to work later in retirement. I'll go be a greeter at Walmart. I'll work at Costco. Now, nothing wrong with any of those jobs, but it can be problematic if that's your contingency plan if you live past age 80.
Where do I begin? If you wanted to potentially go back to work, why did you retire?
Right.
And then is your health going to be good enough to permit that? If you're married, is it going to be a burden for your spouse for you to have to go to work? I think if you want to go to work and for some reason other than money, that's great. But it shouldn't be part of your retirement plan to not retire.
Right. Exactly.
That seems a little counterproductive.
Exactly. And you think about you physically, it's a lot easier to work an extra year or two in your 60s than it would be to probably have to work an extra 5 or 10 years in your 80s or 90s if you run out of money.
But it's illogical.
Right.
Yeah,
it's nonsense.
Yeah.
I think that the idea of work, and I'm just going to tell it like it is, I think the idea of saying, well, hey, if I run out, I'll go back to work, I think that's an excuse for poor planning when deep down it's not going to work and you think, oh, well, this will just be what I'll say to feel good about running out of money, that I have a plan of what to do if that happens. But I've never actually also met somebody who, when they get close to running out of money, that gives us a call and wants to meet with us. Let's say they've been spending and overspending down their retirement savings, and we'll suggest, well, have you ever considered getting a part-time job?
Yeah.
That never goes over very well.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's not something you're going to want to do in that situation.
We've had people come in, take advantage of a complimentary consultation or however we meet them. They come in and they're on a path to destruction.
Right.
And they are spending at a rate that is not going to be sustainable. And let's say they're 75, and, I look at it and I'm thinking in my mind, and sometimes I say this, just depending on, how the circumstance is. Oh, you got a great plan. You're doing this, you're doing that. Okay, what does your broker say? Well, they said, I'm fine. Okay, well, fine, but you will be broke at 82 or whatever year it is. You're just on a path that is running these accounts out of money, and chances are you're not going to be dead at 82 if you're doing okay at 75.
Right, exactly.
I think the one thing that comes up, and I've said this so many times, is a good financial plan cannot be predicated on you having to die.
No.
I mean, oh yeah, I got a great plan. I just have to be dead by a certain year. And that's why it's so important that you have somebody be totally honest and upfront and, like a guideline. Colin, when any of us took our first jobs or later in life, you're working, how much money you make.
Right.
So the lifestyle that amount of money that you're earning permits you to live.
Right.
Okay. So, for example, let's say your first paycheck is $1,000. Mm-hmm. You're at work, you get your first paycheck. Oh, I got $1,000. Now that's going to repeat. But you have to live out of that $1,000.
Right.
Now you wouldn't take that $1,000 and go make a down payment on a new car and not pay the rest of your bills.
No.
It would be nuts.
Exactly.
But you also, in retirement, you have a certain amount of income that should be coming out to make the plan sustainable. You need to live accordingly.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Your retirement plan cannot be based or predicated on what income you need. Your plan has to be based on what income you can derive
and it
from
provides.
What you have.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah. And, that's one thing that we can do in the way we help people is, number one, stop losses that they cannot afford.
Right.
Okay. Number two is try to make the money invested correctly to where it's sustainable, and then reduce the tax. It's like playing golf or whatever. Can you imagine playing golf and you hit a shot and then they take the ball back so many yards?
Right.
Well, that's what taxes is. You get so much money, somebody takes some of it away. And if you can reduce that drag on the account, which that's pre-planning, you don't decide how to do it after you get the money.
Right, exactly.
And so if you take those things and take it away or eliminate the take-backs, the downturns, your retirement can be so much better off.
Absolutely. Last thing I want to share real quick before we wrap up for this week, last piece of our 5 areas of wishful thinking that can damage your retirement is thinking that, let's say we run out of money, let's say we get killed in taxes, let's say that we need help, let's say whatever comes our way, thinking, don't worry, my kids will step up to the plate financially and take care of me. And, I
was silent
Yes.
right then because I was just dumbfounded.
That anybody would think that.
Right, because it's problematic in so many ways, and I've got a great retirement plan. My broker told me I'll be really good. Everything's great. I just need to get $3,000 a month from my kids.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, talk about a bad Thanksgiving.
Exactly. I think it's one thing if you need some medical help or being transported to appointments or things like that, but when it starts to have money involved or providing care involved, I think is where it gets very problematic very quickly. And again, we've never seen it where that works out.
No.
So, maybe it will for you, but for the hundreds of families that we've helped and served, it hasn't for any of them.
Well, it's not even a consideration.
No. So, hey, have a plan for what can happen. We prepare for things that can go wrong so we can enjoy life and have a happy retirement when things go right. And if that's something that we can help you with, we would love to. So go check the link in the description below. It'll take you to ghwealthadvisors.com, and we will see you next week. Bye-bye.
Start building a more secure future for you and your family. Take the first step toward financial clarity by scheduling a no-cost, no-obligation consultation with Grayhurst Wealth Advisors. See if we're the right fit for you by scheduling a consultation. Call us today at 513-984-5999 or click the link in today's show description to get started.